Please note that the information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Hey, welcome to Fertility Ain't Fair, the podcast where we normalize the conversations around infertility, reproductive health, and wellness. I'm your host, Brittany Jackson, here to share laughs, tears, and aha moments as we dive into our wild world with a girl who truly gets it by sharing personal insights from my own experience. Along the way, we're joined by guests who open up about their journeys, the highs, the heartbreaks, and everything in between. So whether you're new to the infertility world, looking for support, or just trying to figure it all out, this is your space to feel seen, heard, and maybe even laugh along the way. Real, raw, unfiltered, because fertility, it ain't fair, but you don't have to face it alone. Well, it is a new year. We have a new year. We have new guests. We have the same mission, though, to normalize the conversations around reproductive health, women's health, and wellness for all. And we have a new guest on Fertility Ain't Fair. I'm so happy to have Sherri Sawyerr, aka Sherri Yvette. However you find her in this space, people want to know who she is. Trust me, after our conversation, for sure. If you don't know who she is already, but she's joining us with, as always, a lot of things to share with our space and our community. So, on this episode, in summary, we're going to go over a few things. Number one, we're going to be talking about what it looks like when you have to change your path and consider things like donor eggs and donor egg IVF and what does that look like. We're also going to get into her amazing book, which is Love Grew Me. I'm excited to talk about it. It's all about how to talk to donor conceived children at a certain age about their journey to getting into this world. And we're also going to definitely cover, and I love when you put it in the email to me, it was talking about grieving genetics. And that one sentence, get out of here.
Yeah.
I felt like I was trying to have people understand that. Hard to explain what I was trying to say, but that one line you put gave it up and summarized it for me. So we're going to get into that as well. But before we get into all of that good stuff, let me just tap the bio real quick because I don't want to leave out any good parts. Okay, so mother, we understand. Storyteller, absolutely. Fertility advocate. And all of this came through your journey to motherhood, which was shaped by faith, loss, and unwavering love. And after the heartbreak of infertility, you and your husband decided to choose donor egg IVF, and that gave you the beautiful gift of your daughter. So we love to hear success stories. But of course, as we mentioned, you didn't stop there because none of us do. We always find other, because we're going to keep giving back, right? Giving back, speaking, putting it out there. Representation is important. You did write your book, and you're also a graduate of Spelman College. My bonus daughter is a freshman at Spelman. So
wonderful.
So an HBCU grad. My husband is too. So Howard, Norfolk State. But I'm excited to discuss with you what redefining like growing your family looks like, and just reminding everyone that like love is what makes a family, nothing else. So with all that being said, welcome to Fertility Ain't Fair, Sherri.
Thank you. Thank you for that amazing introduction. Thank you.
I will give flowers where they're due at all times. Before we get into your story, first things first, every guest on this podcast gets asked the question of, how are you currently defining yourself? I know there was plenty of things in your bio we went over, and some of those words might come back to the top, but if we're meeting you as we are for the first time, how would you define yourself in this season or this space?
I would say, and I've been kind of focusing on my goals. I like to say goals and not New Year's resolutions for 2026. And with all the complexities of life that I've been through, my theme this year is simplicity. And that's in everything that I do, because I've been wearing a lot of hats, and I feel like it's caught up with me in terms of the weight that I feel from all of those different hats, whether that is my career, being a newer mom, just like transitioning from even maternity leave back into work, finally feeling like I kind of am myself again, postpartum, to raising my daughter, and also just, releasing this book, which is another baby of mine, and just kind of planning what the future of evangelizing about that book is, right? When you're trying to help other people, sometimes you don't realize that you can get drained very easily. And that's one thing that I've learned about myself in this space, just by sharing my story. It's easy to get overwhelmed sometimes. It's easy to get overwhelmed by your own grief and other people's grief, and really just being able to be full enough to hold space for everyone, including your family and, your dogs, your animals, everyone that relies upon you for something can feel kind of heavy. So my theme has been to just simplify everything, and so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I love that. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I was actually doing the same thing, and it was funny. I was going between two different words, and I haven't shared with anyone yet. I'm still kind of, letting it marinate. And I had restore on one side, I had revive on the other.
Ooh,
and then I was like, but I said, okay, restore sounded good to me a week ago. But when I went back and looked at the actual definition, right, I was like, I'm not going to ever be the version of myself that I was. Like, I can never factory reset.
Yeah.
So I was like, there is, of course, parts of me at my core who is the same. But as you know, I'm sure, like, this journey changes you. Life takes you in different places and it changes you. And so there have been so much good that's come out of so much hurt and loss. But there's also the fact of the matter is that I have been changed, and I cannot restore myself to the original setting, if you will. So I was like, you know what? I think I would exit out on the paper. I started over on my planner, and I was like, I think revive for now might be the word, because it's a similar word, but really like bring back to life. And so you shared your words. So I was like, let me share my word too and see how it sounds, and talk.
Yeah. That is exactly, maybe I should add that to my vision board too, but that's a great point. And I'm glad that you said that, because I think sometimes, like, we focus on perfectionism, and a lot of this and the grief in this journey comes from the lack of feeling like you're perfect or that you can deliver and create a child on your own. And so realizing and recognizing that you're never going to be the same person you were the day before you started this journey is such an important point to bring up. So I really appreciate you saying that.
No problem.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that journey, let's go ahead and dive in. So I do not think, if I'm wrong, tell me, that donor egg IVF was on your life bingo card. Nope. Okay. We agree with that. And it may not also have been the option that you selected first when you decided with your husband that you all wanted to have children. So take us back to what led you all to the decision to go into donor egg IVF.
Yeah, that's a really good place to start. I would say, so when my husband and I met, we were already older. We were 38. And so we knew that there was a possibility of there being some challenges. And so an early conversation that we had before we were even married was, how far are you willing to go to become a parent? For me, that was adoption, but we knew that there may be some things that we needed to explore a little bit more. And so, we tried, naturally for a while, even before we were married, just because we knew that we were older and we knew we wanted to be married. So we just were trying naturally, and it just wasn't working for us. And so we, sought out a fertility specialist. Now, my OBGYN had been telling me, even before I met my husband, like, once I hit like 35, he's like, okay, what are we doing? Are you preventing or are you trying? Because you kind of got to figure it out, because you're kind of in this weird window, So I was very aware of what the options were, like, in advance, and so it was always something that I felt like I would be open to if we needed to go that route. So we went, booked an appointment, saw a fertility specialist. It was not the best experience. It was actually pretty terrible. And I think it kind of scared us both into, like, what are we even doing here? And it was terrible because I feel like in this space, doctors, there's a lot of smart doctors out there, right? But not all of them have compassion and understanding and sensitivity, because they do this all the time, right? And sometimes I think when you become an expert at something, it's hard to understand what it feels like to be a beginner, and the good doctors understand what it's like for a patient, like, to sit in that chair on the other side as a beginner, understanding what this is. So that's one thing I'll preface and say. So our experience wasn't that great. The doctor didn't even really have the right records up. So he was saying things about my fallopian tubes, like, I don't like that tube. It looks like it's blocked, but it wasn't blocked. didn't have the right, semen analysis for my husband. It was like in the evening, like a 6 o'clock, maybe a 5:30 appointment. So you could tell that his level of energy was not there. We kind of went back and looked at some reviews about him, and there were like terrible reviews. And so we kind of just put a pause on it because I think we were already nervous about it, and it just made it worse. And so we kind of didn't revisit that again for almost another year, I would say. We were like, we're just going to keep trying naturally, keep, taking supplements, making some lifestyle changes, and then we're going to get started. And then we landed on another clinic in Atlanta where we had a better experience, but ultimately we didn't have success. And there are some things that I would like to say to people along the way is when you start IVF, you have no information. You don't have any information of past cycles, of what medications worked before, what vitamins might have worked. You have no information. So if it works for you on the first time, bravo to you. But that is not the norm, And sometimes it takes switching clinics, switching doctors, switching protocols to really get to the place of fully understanding your body, what your body responds to, what your body doesn't respond to. And so with this clinic, we ultimately didn't have success. And the protocols that the doctor was using were just not very tailored, I felt like, to me as, an older woman who, sometimes we don't respond to the highest doses of everything. Sometimes we need a lower dose. So ultimately that didn't work out. We switched clinics again to CNY in New York. And, most people who are in this fertility space know about CNY a little bit. But if you don't know about CNY, the thing that attracted me to them is that Dr. Kiltz, who is the owner and, main doctor there, he was open to balancing medical, protocols with lifestyle changes, like, changing your diet, trying different medications, like with immune protocols and all those things. So I felt like that was a good option. So at this time when we had transferred to CNY, we had been through one egg retrieval of my own and then one IUI. It was a failed IVF cycle that turned into an IUI. And so we were working on our third attempt at an egg retrieval with CNY. Now, CNY is really where I learned more so about donor eggs because they have a program where you can add 4 donor eggs onto your own egg cycle. And to me, that felt safe because it was like, hey, I still have the option to try with my own eggs. If it doesn't work, we have these donor eggs to try as well. I'm not going to say a backup plan because it's not a backup plan, everybody. It's not. But we have the option.
Extra.
And so that's how I learned about donor eggs. I also, this is when I kind of established my YouTube journey as well in documenting all of this. And I met a lot of people that would comment on my videos. And I ended up in a lot of great Facebook groups, either for like CNY or different clinics that I was a part of or different things, IVF over 40. I mean, there's literally a group for anything you can think of. Yep. Donor eggs, IVF over 40. So I honestly learned the most from my peers, just to be quite honest. And people. So that's why I feel like I always tell people that you need to find your community when you're going through this because you are going to learn so much between the lines from your community rather than your doctor sometimes. Yeah. So ultimately, CNY did not work out because they are such a big clinic. I felt like the care wasn't specialized enough for the issues because I never had implantation success at all, like with anything, my own eggs. CNY was the only place we got to the point of a transfer. We did end up with 4 embryos of my own and 1 embryo from that 4 donor add-on that we started. So we decided like, we'll go ahead and transfer, the embryos that were made from my eggs and my husband's sperm. And then we'll try, the donor embryo later. And so when we tried the transfers with my eggs and nothing worked, we were in a position of like, okay, we have 1 donor embryo left. We wanted to have, more than 1 child. Do we stop here or do we maybe look for a different donor? And, donors of color are very hard to find. And we just were not finding that like at CNY easily. There weren't a lot of options. And so one of the Facebook groups I was in, a friend of mine introduced me to our current clinic, which is Utah Fertility Clinic. But now it's Nevada Fertility Clinic because my doctor retired from Utah and is only practicing at his Nevada location. So I've been on 1, 2, 3 clinics, 4 technically. And so they had a larger pool of donors of color, Utah, like the weirdest thing you would think, like, how does that happen?
No, right. I was like, wait, what? Are they all from Utah? Like, we're
right. And we were able to find like the most perfect donor for our family. My husband is Liberian and our donor is half African. So that was such a wonderful find, like to be able to have, you know, something that close, someone that close to what, you know, our genetic makeup is as it is. So we wanted to get, you know, more eggs, have more embryos so that our children could be full genetic siblings. I don't think that that matters now. Then it mattered to me, but I don't think it matters now. Now that my daughter's here and I see how she loves her friends and people around her who she's not related to at all. Yeah. Ultimately, I don't think it matters. And I think it can be a hindrance when you're in this journey and you limit yourself for any reason about looks, genetics, all those things. It doesn't matter. But at the time it did. So we ended up with 6 normal embryos from the eggs that we purchased through Utah, which was, and this is one place where like the trauma that you feel of like going through IVF with your own eggs, when you might have 5 embryos with your own eggs and you're hoping that maybe one of them is normal, you know, and you get back results that none of them are normal. And then you go with a donor and one, like, so we had 7 embryos and 6 of those 7 were normal. That's the shift that you feel of like joy, but then grief at the same time. Like, goodness, like I would never have gotten these results. Yeah. So that's how we landed where we are. And then we tried one transfer that didn't work. My doctor there also was very specialized in my care. I mean, you know, we had an initial conversation over Zoom, you know, it was with him and a coordinator. As busy as he is and as many people as he serves, it still felt personal. He invited me to come to the clinic to do my saline. He discovered that I have something called adenomyosis. No other doctor before that ever looked into anything like that. And so it made me wonder, like, would it have worked if we had treated the adenomyosis first? That level of care is important in working with the doctor. And if they're not willing to take those extra steps pretty quickly, then I feel like it's time to change your doctors. And so we treated the adenomyosis, and then the next transfer resulted in my daughter.
You gave a lot of good pieces of information. I mean, a lot of just key things as people are going through their journey, things to think about, things to ask, things to do. I love the fact that you changed clinics when it wasn't right.
Yeah.
I think, you know, we stayed with our first, we only had 2 because there's only like a couple in the area in Virginia. And we started with one and we were there for multiple years. And we had 2 different doctors, but again, a large clinic. They're in multiple states. And, you know, our last doctor before we left was the best, I think, doctor in terms of just, she had good bedside manner and she was just, you know, rooting for us, I think. But there was also, to your point, a lack of wanting to look beyond what the book says.
Yeah.
We did change protocols multiple times. And to your point, it's a very expensive trial and error session. It's like you said, we don't know, right? And so it is normal to have to do this more times. People should realize that, you know, but I think I stayed there just because I just felt this, I don't know, like I'm comfortable. I don't want to start over again. But I love the fact that you were like, it's not right. It's not what I want. It doesn't feel good. It's also not working. So go somewhere else. I have a question. So you said at 35, your doctor was like, what you doing? My first question is, were you surprised that 35 was the tipping point, or were you prepared for that? Because I was surprised when I found out that was like their scale. And also, did you ever consider freezing your eggs before, of course, knowing what we know now? But back then, did anyone approach you about it? Did you consider it or any of that?
Not at all. I mean, I was surprised here that 35 was like the rush date. Like I thought that, you know, even the advice I was given then was that it was too late to freeze my eggs. And I almost wish I didn't listen to that, because that's not true. I probably could have done several egg freezing rounds at that age into 40 whenever I met someone. And that might have looked a little different. And so that's another piece of advice I always tell people is don't listen to that, because there are people in their 40s that freeze their eggs. And I think that that's fine, you know?
Yeah. So before we get into, I guess, the process, donor eggs and what you all did and kind of what your criteria was. It's always a really big question, the criteria we look for. It's like a dating game for your eggs. Yeah. How did you process the transition? And I think it's also great that CNY had the option to add donor eggs on. So I feel like you were already a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of accepting this could be a path, right?
Yeah.
Versus, I think people that I've talked to, or even myself, right, it wasn't brought up until, it got to the point of like, well, we might want to consider it, or you may want to just think about it, or now we have no other options. So I love that. But how did you, or when did you work through that process of, okay, my child may not have, my DNA. And like I said in your message, grieving genetics is a real thing. And so how did you process that? And how did you come to terms with it in order to say, yes, I want to move forward in any kind of like donor egg space?
So yes, CNY definitely kind of gives you the introduction into it with that program that they had. But I think for me, my goal was always to be a mother. And I also, in my family, we have, I have cousins who are adopted. And so I've always been open to many different ways to become a parent. I think since a young age, because of that exposure that I had to my aunt and uncle who tried for a long time and had a really hard time having kids. And then they were blessed with, 2 children, a boy and a girl that, had like the same mother and all that, like pretty quickly back to back. And so I was already kind of used to that concept, but I think it really depends on a few things. So like, you have to remember what your goals are. Is that to become a mother, no matter what that journey is? If the answer is no, that's okay too. I think that you have to just sit with that and really accept it, because once you go that route, everything happens so fast. You look up and you are buying eggs, they're fertilizing them, you get, your results, and you are pregnant. And then you have to prepare to become a mom. So it's something where I think on the front end, you have to take the time to really process that and understand what that means. I'm a big advocate of therapy, and I've had a therapist for a very long time in my life, just for life in general. And so I sought out a therapist who specialized in reproductive health, women's health, to kind of process a lot of these feelings that I probably couldn't talk through with, my family, or even, my husband at times, even though we talked about, going through this. And we both had to grieve losing my genetics to a degree, you know what I mean? But, men sometimes aren't as expressive emotionally, and they won't talk about a subject until dead horse has been beaten over the head, like we will as women sometimes. I also, because I'm a storyteller and I like reading stories, I made it a point to find my community in this. So I wanted to find other women who had gone through the same process. I was lucky enough to find a Facebook group for women of color who are using donor eggs. You have to be like a woman of color to get in there. And I know that for some people that may sound discriminatory or whatever, but the real reality of the matter is that we are such a minority in this space that we need a community of people that look like us, that are doing the same thing, because of the cultural connotations that come along with going this route. A lot of people in this group cannot tell their family members that their children are donor conceived. They just deal with the shame differently than other cultural groups. And that's just the way it is, So I found that group. I was lucky enough to find that group, and I lurked in that group for a while before I even commented or introduced myself. But I just read all the stories of the women who had tried so hard or so long, and then they were able to have their children, and then seeing the pictures of their babies being born, and just how happy they were, and how they said that whole IVF journey, the trauma of that, was so worth it to be able to end up here. Because the beauty about donor eggs is that you still can be pregnant. And I think for a lot of people, that makes it a little bit easier to swallow. I think sometimes when you can raise that seed that was planted with your blood, everything you eat is what influences, the health of that child. You feel the movements first before anyone else. You're going to ultrasound appointments. You have the same experience as someone who would have conceived naturally in terms of the physical portion of it. Now, emotionally, there's still things that you have to process and go through. And it's still a process. I'm not even gonna lie. She's 2 now. And there's still moments of the older she gets, the more aware of the world she becomes, where I feel a slight bit of nervousness in how one day she's going to feel to know her story, how she's going to feel when she watches maybe my YouTube channel one day and how we documented this journey. How is she going to feel about that? How is she going to feel as a donor conceived child? And when you're going through this process, most clinics want you to get like a psychologist or a psychiatrist to do a psychoanalysis of you and your partner about how you're going to have these hard conversations with your child. And so my husband and I did that. And they really emphasize the importance of telling your child very early on their conception story so that it is just a part of normal conversation. And so that is where this book came from, because when I was doing my research, even before I was pregnant and we decided to go the donor route, I wanted to find books that, I could read to her, to my child in the future. I didn't know it was a girl then, that would help me, and give me a tool to be able to explain to my child, how they were conceived. And there were some books on Amazon that I came across. A lot of them use animals to kind of keep it neutral and describe this journey. But because as an African-American woman, finding my community in this was so difficult and unique and specialized, I wanted to create something that was unique and specialized specifically for children going this route. Doesn't have to be just for Black children, even though it's based on our family. But I wanted children of color to see themselves somewhere in this process as well. Because, I've been having this conversation with my daughter since she came home about how she was conceived. We read this book all the time. It lives in her room on her bookshelf, like next to the Bluey book, next to all the other regular books that we read all the time. I want it to be a normal part of our conversation. And it's really dress rehearsal for you, because when they do become more aware and they're older, you're more comfortable having these conversations. But the genetics and thinking about the genetics, it comes in waves. It's really heavy in the beginning, I think. And then it kind of tapers off, but then it shows up, in waves. It's just like grief, like it shows up in waves. Like for me, it doesn't feel like grief now because I have fully accepted, our path to parenthood, and my daughter and I's bond is so close. My husband will probably not like me to say this, but it's true right now. Right now, I'm her favorite person. And she will say things like, Mama, we would have just, been in her room and I go to the bathroom and come back. And she'll be like, Mama, I missed you, And so to me, any grief, any challenge, any heaviness that I felt in the beginning is worth being able to hear those words.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for getting into the book. This is a natural progression into it. I love the fact you also said that the book, while it's a children's book, right? So it's made to tell your child, but I love that you said it's actually rehearsal for the parent, because as you said, it's going, you start out with these conversations at this age. And then of course, as they get older, there'll be age appropriate, different conversations and other questions that they'll actually have to respond back. At any point in time, how was your family? Like, how were they? Were they supportive? Were your friends supportive? Did you feel like you had outside of your community? Because I agree. First of all, Facebook, I will not get rid of the app for
never.
2 things. The marketplace,
yes,
also birthdays, but more so now it's marketplace and the groups. Because like you, I have been finding my tribe for literally as specifically as possible what I need. And it has been, like you said, I have learned more from peers that I've never met than I have from probably any medical professional this whole entire time. So I agree. But did you have that support? Did you have the friends, the family that are also, fully on board and I get it, or I want to understand, or I do understand? And how was that for you?
Yes, I did. The way that we didn't share with our family that we used a donor until after our daughter was born, because we wanted, not that we were worried that they would accept it or not, because everyone did, and everyone doesn't even talk about that, and everyone loves her. There's no difference in the love that they give for her, but we wanted us to just keep that to ourselves, to process and to bond without other people giving opinions or asking questions about that. There were a few close friends that I shared it with who have been, pretty much a part of the journey from the very beginning, to where, all your friends are not going to understand. But, there were certain people that really understood from the beginning who I shared that with, because like I also had to process it myself, and I couldn't just do that by myself. I had to do it with people that I trusted 100%, that knew my dreams, and I felt like weren't going to let their fears or their insecurities cloud my dreams about that. And so there were people that I shared with that were very, close to me in the early part, but our like immediate families we shared with after the fact. But everyone was just so accepting. And honestly, we didn't even share it publicly until I released my book. So 2 years after, my daughter was born, my book launched in November. That was the first time that publicly that I had announced it, in that kind of way. I mean, I posted a video on my YouTube channel, maybe like earlier last year, but a lot of my like personal friends don't necessarily follow me on YouTube. Right. So it felt like safer because those were my people. Those were the community.
I get it. I do.
Like the Instagram posts that I made launching my book and the Facebook post that I made launching my book was the announcement publicly about our story.
And that's where I think I saw you first. With that post, I was like, who is this beautiful woman, this adorable daughter, and this little family? I was like, and she's a book. I was like, wait, what's it about? And I was like, is it her story? I was like, oh, I have to reach out. So many questions for her. But no, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. But in terms of, I know you mentioned the process goes very fast. You buy, the check clears, and all of that. Before you get to all of that, the check clearing, you're figuring out who this person might be. And so what was, again, everyone is different and everyone will have their own criteria. And there's no right or wrong game here. And every clinic is also different. So what were, I guess, the key criteria for you and your husband looking for a donor? I know you mentioned that she was perfect and she was, but what other criteria? Because I know you also mentioned that later on, things like the looks, right? We're caught up on, does she look like me? Does her pictures of the baby resemble me or anyone in my family? But I think to your point, and I've done my browsing through multiple sites, and I find myself, again, we're not there yet, but I was like, I just want to get in there and see how I feel. I was getting caught up in that. I mean, I'm looking at the education and of course, like genetics and diseases. That's also very important.
Yes, it is.
But Vanity sent me right on back to, could she be my cousin?
So I would say, if I'm being honest, that is going to be the first thing that attracts you to a donor. And when I was going with, CNY, and we had chosen a donor there, the way that I felt about the donor, Ella's donor, was not the way I felt about that donor in the beginning, because they didn't have as many options. That donor was not a donor of color, like another ethnicity that was kind of closer, like skin tone wise and all that. And so I just didn't feel super excited about it. And that's probably why we paused once we had kind of gone through my eggs. But I was looking for my twin. So that's not the right thing to look for either. That's what I would say. It's natural to look for your twin. It's natural, but that you're never going to find another you. And so that is what I feel like sets people into like a sadness or a depression sometimes about it, is because you're looking for yourself and you're not ever going to find yourself. And so it feels like another failure, right? Once I let go of trying to find my twin, I said, okay, let me look for features in someone that are similar to mine. Like, my eye shape, maybe they have big eyes, kind of like how I have. Maybe they look like someone in my family. They look like they could be family, like a cousin. I just wanted to make sure that I found a donor to where my daughter, when she does hear this story and understands it, she's going to be like, are you kidding me? Like, I look like so many people in this family. You know what I mean? So I kind of canceled out the twin and I was looking for family, like relatable features, right? And it's really funny. My daughter has a gap in her teeth, just like my mom, And my husband's sister also has a gap. And so, genetically, that's where she probably gets it from. But my mom has one too. So they always say that epigenetics influence, how
I just learned that term like middle of last year. And I was like, what?
Yeah. For those of you who don't know what epigenetics means, it just means that, the birthing mother controls like what traits are kind of turned on and off. And so because your blood is mixing with your baby's blood and all these kinds of things, there are bound to be traits and characteristics about your child, even though they're donor conceived, that will still be similar to you, right? So once I got past the identical twin, I was looking for a family, similarities, and then I focused on health, which I think should supersede anything else. But the reality of it is it just doesn't. I wanted to look for a donor who was proven in the sense that she had done past cycles and had live births from those cycles. I wanted a donor who I could see the clinic could provide me the stats of, her genetic background. Was she a carrier for anything? All that kind of stuff. And our donor was not, which was great. And also I wanted to see, out of so many eggs purchased, how many of those were normal embryos. So that narrows a list real quick, because you will probably pick 4 or 5 people that you like, and you're going to be like, how do I narrow this down? And the health always quickly narrows things down. Now, I will say proven donors are not always a guarantee, right? So there are people that are new donors that maybe have never donated before, but maybe they have children already. Yeah. Maybe they, have really good health statistics that should also be considered. I would not say to rule someone out because they're not proven, but you just want to make sure that health-wise, they check all the boxes. Mm-hmm. And so once we did that, we, landed on our donor, and we actually purchased frozen eggs. So we didn't cycle a donor live, like through her egg retrieval and all that. It just so happened that the donor that we really loved had frozen eggs. So that's why we went that route. A lot of people cycle a donor, like, she's taking her medications, doing an egg retrieval, and then you get the fresh eggs, they say, or whatever. I can't say which one is better than the other. Some people would probably say fresh is, you better outcomes than frozen, but a lot of egg banks only have frozen eggs. So don't let that limit you. You just have to understand that there is some risk in losing some eggs in the thaw. So that's why I say buy as many eggs as you can afford. Mm-hmm. We bought 20 eggs. I felt like that was safe. We bought all the rest of the eggs in the lot that she had available. Mm-hmm. And then we went from there. And when I chose her, I'd actually had a conversation with Dr. Hammond, Dr. Camille Hammond from the Cade Foundation. I was telling her that we were in the process. This is when we had not gone with Utah yet. We were still with CNY, and we had one of those donor embryos there from those eggs. And she was like, listen, you need to love the donor that you are choosing. There is no giving this back. There's no turning around. You have to love the donor that you choose, because this is the rest of your life, And so that's what made me also pivot to kind of look for other options of like, well, where else can we find, eggs? Also, you have to really, love the donor that you're choosing, make sure all the health stuff checks out, and then just get ready, because it happens so fast after that. And, I was just used to delays, I guess. You get traumatized into thinking that like the delays are normal, and they are, but then when things good happen to you, you almost can't receive it because you're so used to the trauma behind it. So it's like, you're always going to have to work through something, in accepting, like, is it okay to be excited at this point, And so that's the process of how we chose, our donor. And then once we did that, everything else just happened so fast. So you pick your donor. That's probably a very challenging part of the process. I'm not going to say it's the hardest, but it is a really hard part of the process, because it's hard to find someone that is giving you this seed of life, right? That you want to carry and you want to bond with and all these things. Once that was done, I felt a burden of weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt like, okay, I can kind of breathe now and buckle up for the rest of this ride.
Yeah. I think something else that you mentioned, loving a donor, make sure the health is important, getting yourself ready. And in terms of, I guess, looking forward, when your child does become, an adult, and again, back to those questions. And, I know some clinics that I've seen are now doing the ID at 18, either as mandatory, some are doing it optional. And I'm sure there's a million other different, ways to do this or not do it at all. I'm not sure what it's going to look like, moving forward, but with your decision, your clinic, did you have to decide if that was, it's almost like adoption, like open or close, but did you have to decide what you wanted to do in terms of your child's ability to get information on their donor? And I'm sure you have thought about it. So it's a silly question, but have you thought about, how that might feel if it is indeed, questions, of course, they might have or want to find them, reach out to them, if that's even an option in your case?
Yeah. So most donors are going to be anonymous, but you do have to just ask if you have to ask your clinic, if they would be open to contact once your child is 18. And so we asked that if, through email, if, Ella's donor would be open to communicating with her, should Ella want to seek her out and know more information. Mm-hmm. So I asked that because I want her to know her identity. You know what I mean? I feel like sometimes with what the psychologists say about donor conceived children is that, when they start having negative feelings about their story is when the parents have tried to hide it from them. So leading them to believe one thing, and then at an older age, they realize it. And then their whole life has changed for them. I mean, at some point of revealing this to Ella, her life is going to change a little bit, right? Everything she thought of how her childhood looked and how she came to be, it is true. But it's just that she may have been too young to fully understand and process what that meant. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's going to look different to her. I am 100% open for her to pursue getting to know who her donor is on any level and supporting her in that. Because one thing also to remember about donors is some people donate because they don't want to have kids ever. And they have no interest in ever being a parent. Some people donate. What I found in my search through donors is some people are going through like a sexual reassignment change. And before they do that, they want to donate their eggs. And so some people don't necessarily want to be parent or they don't want the contact, but they do want to help someone to become a parent. And so understanding that is very different than adoption sometimes, because with adoption, it's a whole child being given to someone else that is not genetic related on any side. But with a donor, they're giving a cell to, to the recipient to be combined with a partner or something to be grown by, right? But whatever Ella wants to do, I will fully support. I will help her. And I think in this day and age of 23andMe and all that, it's hard to be closed about this because even though some people may not want to be contacted, all that kind of stuff, knowing that the donor has had other successful, pregnancies as a result of her donation, Ella already has half genetic siblings out there in the world. So it would be silly of me to feel like she wouldn't discover that one day, or it would be silly of me and unfair for me not to help her if she ever is interested in that, to uncover her full identity. That to me is important. I have that because I know where I came from. I know who my family is and all that. So I would absolutely give that to my daughter. Is it something that would be hard for me? Maybe, but not hard enough to where I wouldn't do it. I have thought about, well, how will she look at me then? Will she still look at me as her mom? Will she still look at me the same way she does now? Those are all, I think, normal thoughts in all of this, but it's nothing that will prevent me from helping her to get whatever she needs. And I've kept records of, the donor's profile for her, pictures, baby pictures, all of that, so that it is easily accessible whenever she's ready to talk about it. And it's organized. And that's what you get. Like, you get pictures, you get like an essay or a questionnaire that they've answered about themselves. You get genetic history and background. I mean, you get a lot of detailed information about them, to their like grandparents and any issues they may have had, all those kinds of things. And so it's a lot to look through and scroll through, and in choosing a donor as a woman of color, there are some things that can be very limiting. Some people look for things like education to match theirs. And if that's important to you, that's important to you. But it's going to limit your pool if you start getting into that. Because I strongly believe that the way you raise a child is the way that they will be accustomed to life. So if you want, a child, your child to go to college and get master's degrees, as long as you are modeling that behavior to your child, and that's something that they will be interested in, and they will probably follow suit anyway. So I don't think that is something that they could inherit necessarily from a donor.
Yeah.
But I do understand why that's important to people. So.
Yeah. This has been really good. This has been so good in terms of just learning your story and learning what you did to get to parenthood. Like I said, redefining what it looks like, what it can be when you open yourself up to possibility. We know it's not for everybody. We know that, the same way adoption's for everybody, or surrogacy's not, or IVF's not, or whatever it is. But knowing, I think you said earlier with you and your husband were kind of like determining, hey, like how far will you go to be a parent? And that is a really solid question, I think, for anybody who was going into this or going into a relationship who thinks they might have children, whether you're married, not, partner, whatever it is, this person you say you want to have a kid with. Because my husband, he asked me that actually. He was like, I will go as far as you want to go. Yeah. But like, what does that look like? And I think like you, I said, I haven't really considered what that could be. But I think to your point, I grew up knowing that love made family. I had my mom's best friends from growing up. They both had fertility issues that I now know as an adult and have talked to them about it, but adopted children. So again, I grew up knowing that, family can resemble what it is, but of course it's different when you actually go through it. Knowing that, I think it's, again, that was a really, a little nugget of information for anyone looking to do this. So yes, those who want to find you, connect with you, of course, buy the book, Love Grooming. How can they find you and how can they reach out to you and buy your book?
Yeah, so I live mostly on Instagram and YouTube and a little bit on TikTok. I'm getting there more, but on Instagram and TikTok, I'm at I am Sherri Yvette. And in my bios, there will be a link to be able to click to purchase my book through Amazon, but you can also look it up on Amazon. Love Grooming by Sherri Sawyerr. Sawyerr has 2 R's at the end. That is not a typo. But it's in all of my bios across the board. My website is also iamsherriyvette.com. You can find information there as well. But yeah, I'm going to get better about YouTube because I feel like sometimes I'm like, okay, like I had my little girl. Are people still interested in what I have to say? But yeah, they are, you know, especially this donor conversation. This is something that is ongoing. And it's something also on my YouTube channel that I revealed after the fact. So I love the community that has grown from that. So make sure that you are following me on all those platforms. But, the link in my bio will have links to my book and, other ways that you can kind of engage. But I always tell people to, just send me a DM sometimes, just reach out and say hello. I usually check my DMs all the time. And I'm always happy to kind of help talk to people about this because a lot of people find me in the middle of the night after a failed cycle. That's usually when, people reach out and say that has happened. And now they're in this position of considering donor eggs and they don't know what to do. Yeah. So I am honored that people value my opinion enough to even want my feedback. So my DMs are always open about that, and on any level. So, Instagram is probably the best way to DM me, but I'm on TikTok and then on YouTube, I'm at Sherri Yvette on YouTube, but you can find that also on my Instagram bio.
Perfect. I hope y'all got that. If not, of course, it will be in the comments, in the descriptions, wherever we release the episode. It will be everywhere you can find her. Sherri, I just say thank you again. Thank you for being a space. Thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you for continuing to go back and help us out who are still in the trenches. I know, again, to your point, you've gone through a lot. You came out on the other side, and we love to see that. I mean, you could have been like, okay, y'all, well, good luck. Figure it, right. Figure it out, but you didn't. So I'm so grateful that there are people like you who are not only taking their story, but sharing it and also taking and turning it into something like a book that is so needed. So that wraps us up for this episode of Fertility for the podcast. thank you. It's, again, a new year, a new season, new episodes, new guests, but our same mission. And so if you haven't, please make sure you go back and play past episodes. Follow us at Fertility Ain't Fair. Go to our website. And I am going to do a newsletter. Y'all know, I just
email list is where it's at.
It has not happened. I've had the feature for as long as the website, so multiple years. And I was like, you know what? It's time to, come in y'all inboxes every once in a while. I'm not going to spam. You're not here for me every week. I don't have time. But when I think it's important, or a new episode like this, I will definitely be sharing and dropping a newsletter. So make sure you sign up for that as well. But in the meantime, I am your forever friend in fertility. So stay hopeful.